and welcome. I'm Bob Jimenez, your host for Islam in Contemporary Life, and a conversation with Professor Fathi Osman. You know, Islam is a world religion, but sometimes here in the West it is misunderstood, sometimes feared. You know, it's a good idea to take a balanced look at Muslim life and its religion. Why? Well, because we're a shrinking world. We're all now part of a global family. Right now, 1.2 billion people on Earth are Muslim. And it's estimated by the year 2025, 1 in 4 people will be Muslim. So let's begin exploring a religion that's considered a way of life and spend the next hour with Professor Osman. He's going to share his thoughts and beliefs. It's going to take us through a journey. He's 70 years old now and in the autumn of his life. What has it taught him? What can we learn from this fascinating man? Professor, thanks for this opportunity.
Thank you.
Your daughter describes you, and I find this kind of interesting, as a loving, playful father. That's not the kind of description of a scholar of your stature.
Well, I like children, and I like the stage of childhood. I try to be a child with children, play with them, putting myself in their shoes, let them enjoy their time with me.
But that's a time that you spend alone with your family. This is the part of you that people don't see that often.
Yes, it is an important part of my life to be with my family. My child, I have only one child, and my wife. We stay together, we talk, and when my child was young, I play with her. So this is a very, very interesting part of my life, and I enjoyed that her childhood so much, probably more than her.
You were born in 1928.
Yes.
In Egypt.
Yes.
The time of King Farouk.
King Fuad first, followed by his son King Farouk in the 30s, in the early 30s. So I attended both, but with regard to King Fuad, I was too young to understand what was going on.
When did you begin understanding?
Maybe when I was 9 years old, 10 years old, in the time of King Farouk. King Farouk was very popular in his early stage, in his beginnings. Everywhere, wherever he visits, or he visited at that time Egypt, popular songs and folklore and so on. So my eyes opened on the popularity of King Farouk. He was young. His father died and left him too young to be, even they have a guardian and so on for the throne. So sympathy and love and everything was around him. Then when he grows older and older, and I grew older and older, I began to understand what is going on behind the curtain of politics, or of this political stage.
Kind of a shroud that really all governments put forward, don't they?
Yes, yes. The first, of course, the first thing which happened, which was shocking at that time, was that in 1942, the British, of course, Egypt in that time was under the British occupation. They had many bases there, military bases. So during the war, they wanted a certain popular government, and they had to impose this on King Farouk because he didn't like, first, did not like to get this thing dictated by the British. Second, he didn't like this popular figure. So this was the first thing, the rumors that the palace of the king was under siege, and the ambassador, the British ambassador, entered as if he was a victorious military marshal or general, and dictated his. So this was the first thing that I heard. This did not affect the popularity of the king. As a matter of fact, it increased the popularity. But after this, when he grew older, and then there was the Palestine struggle, and rumors around that there were bad weapons given to the soldiers, and the palace might have some share in this corruption to sell the weapons to Egypt as a government. All this began to be revealed, and then the popularity of the king began to decline.
But in the meantime, what was life like? How did the politics affect the everyday life of an Egyptian?
Well, at that time, the popularity of certain political party called Wafd, which means delegation, because it was founded when an Egyptian delegation went after World War I to Paris to attend the conference for peace and ask for the evacuation of the British. And it continued under this name, Wafd, and it was very popular at that time. But of course, it was accused with some corruption, some favoritism for certain big members of the, as it happened always in a recently independent country, and the independence was not full. So the situation was more complicated for a child to understand. But the popularity of this political party was everywhere.
What went through your mind, though, as a child, walking the streets of Cairo?
I didn't myself walk in the streets. Even when I was a student in the university, I didn't participate in demonstrations or something, probably for lack of physical fitness. I was very fat at that time, and it was difficult for me to go for a long walk, to protest or to do anything specific. So I attended the conferences at the university. I listened to the speakers and so on, but I didn't go in such a thing. And I wrote some articles with regard to independence, to the political aspirations of the people, something like this.
All right. But, I mean, it's hard to imagine, being from the West, what it would be like in those times. Did you feel free? Did you feel free to love, free to worship?
At that time, there was freedom, relatively speaking, about my whole life. This early period, because we had several political parties, there was a sort of balance, because every political party thinks that he would not be permanent in power, and some others would come. So every political party in charge would look over the shoulders to not to make big mistakes. So there was relatively some freedom, some balance of power, and I think this was the important achievement of democracy, even it was connected with corruption or with many abuses. But with regard to this point specifically, the freedom of expression, for example, the freedom of forming political parties, of opposition. Many writers criticized King Farouk himself, and of course it was a crime according to the law, and they had to go to jail and so on. But everybody faced this bravely, and as a matter of fact, it was something for publicity to criticize the king and to go to jail for a limited time, sometimes going out by parole or anything like this, or by amnesty when the government is changed. All this gave a sort of, with regard to the freedom of expression. Corruption and so on, of course. There was corruption, favoritism, favoring the political party when it is in power, giving certain contracts from the government to the distinguished people, members of the political party. All this happened, of course.
As you say, as you got older, you began writing about concepts of liberty, concepts of freedom.
Yes.
And it got you in trouble, didn't it?
Yes, it got me in trouble because, of course, of the certain governments did not like this, and mostly after this, when certain regimes came and they did not like any writing about freedom or something like this.
How much trouble?
Well, now I wanted to forget really this period, but I went to jail certain time.
You were one in jail with the others?
Yes, yes. And this happened to...
And your crime, what was your crime?
Pardon?
What was your crime?
Calling for freedom or not supporting the authoritarian regimes or the despotic regime, which claims that it has a monopoly on patriotism and nationalism, and they are the only sincere people, and any opposition would be categorized as treason. All this happened, of course.
How long did you stay in jail?
Well, it was different times, but the longest time that I stayed, it was about 2 years.
2 years?
There are other scattered periods.
2 years without your family?
Yes, no connection with outside at all. Even letters, even books, even the Quran itself, we had no relation to any intellectual or social contact.
What did you do all that time?
Well, the only thing is to pray, to rethink about the whole process that happened before, what went wrong with me, with the whole thing. Of course, it is a time of contemplation, of reflection, rather than doing anything, because you are left 24 hours to yourself. But I don't assume, or I don't think that I was so quiet or concentrating, because of course the jail was not a suitable place for contemplation or reflection, but as possible. This happened as possible, because you are surrounded by many things which kill thinking.
Yes, and the beatings that you would hear every day, every night, right?
Of course.
Did you ever fear for your life?
At that time, and under this continuous sort of pressure, losing life might be better than continuing under these pressures day and night. So losing life was not something. The horrible thing was that you might continue in this way with regard to poor health and with regard to all these pressures for a long time, and you can survive, but you, of course, you are very, very pressured.
But you were spared. Why?
Well, the only thing is that I try to find a way in benefiting from this period through thinking, and I couldn't have hope that this would change soon. So the only thing is to get used to this way of life. It was very, very difficult. It was not a pleasant time of my life, and as a matter of fact, I am trying always to forget this period with all its pains, in spite of the fact that it was also an eye-opener in many areas.
Indeed, and this is probably the best time to bring up
Yes.
Islam faith.
Yes.
You prayed
Yes.
every day? And
Yes.
what did you ask God?
Ask God, of course, to be released, to get relief of this pressure. And in the Quran, there is a reference always among the gifts of God, that security, or to feel secure from fear. Really, I valued this too much in this period. I didn't think that fear is so destructive to all the intellectual and the human abilities, and it might reduce the human being to an animal or less, just to how to get some sleep, how to go to the bathroom, how to get reasonable or decent food. The human being can be reduced to an animal, really. And accordingly, I valued freedom and the human rights and caring about democracy.
And you valued your religion, because a lot of people under these same circumstances would fall, would buckle, that would say, God, you've forsaken me. I will forsake you. What is it about Islam that held you?
Well, I believe that according to Islam, God has certain laws in this world, and he does not favor those who are good from these laws. The real place and time for reward is the hereafter. But in this life, any person who is doing good may not be rewarded. Any person who is doing bad may have good fortune. So in this life, the laws of God are there. So Muslims and the Islamic movement and the movement for freedom and for democracy is weak. It happened at that time that the forces of despotism and authoritarianism and so on were so strong. So I should accept this as a law of God in this world and look for the future for change, but the change should happen through human beings. It cannot be done by God. God does not do miracles for people. He has laws, probably miracles for saints, for prophets, for something, but this is the exception which confirms the general rule. And the general rule is the laws of nature for all people.
What are you saying? God does not intervene?
He is not intervening. I think making these laws and letting them be executed or carried out is intervening. He is intervening and he is always in control. And he can make changes that we may not know how can they fit in the rules of cause and effect. But in general, we cannot expect this, or we cannot make our calculations according to these exceptional things that we do not know how they work.
Springs a variety of beliefs and law of God that govern marriage, sex, relationships, all sorts of things in life. Mm-hmm. Is that how it spread from that time?
Yes, I believe that first there is his guidance to follow certain rules, but there are the general laws that anybody who does good in this life, he would be rewarded proportionally, but not necessarily completely. And the person who does bad, he would be also get his outcome or what he deserves, but not necessarily completely. So the work in itself carries its value and its reward. And if the person believes in what he is doing, the greatest reward is his satisfaction, is that he is pleased about himself, because it is one of the great pains in this life when the person himself is not happy with himself, is not satisfied with what he is doing. Every time he does something and he blames himself for it, and he tries to kill this blame, to carry on and to have harmony with all his... this is a very, very painful procedure. And those who claim that satisfying the conscience is very painful in such a material world, I believe that it is the opposite. Trying to disobey or get out of the guidance of God and of the conscience, which is a reflection of the guidance of God, is very painful and is not consistent. And in every time you have to solve an equation or a very difficult problem to make yourself accepting the state quo. While the guidance of God and the conscience is consistent, is straight, and it makes you very, very, at least at ease with yourself.
Not all Muslims believe as you do, though. Some Muslims take the law of God and use it as a sword of destruction.
Well, in all religions, I think a religion being from the Lord of all human beings is a message of mercy and the grace and the forgiveness and the passion and the compassion. The person happens, any person who believes in a religion is twisting the religion to be for his own service personally, and ignores that it is from the Lord of all human beings, of humanity. In this case, when this twist happens in the history of Christianity, Islam, Buddhism, Hinduism, any religion. That is the destruction, because here all the limitations of the human being represented in egoism, in selfishness, in aggression, in violence, can be easily twisted to show himself or to convince himself that he is responding to all his lowest instincts as human being, not as a human being, but as a servant of God, and the twisting is very easy, and this is one of the capabilities of the human mind, that it can turn anything to make the person happy.
I've got to ask you this. Is the Islamic Jihad twisting God's law?
Certainly yes, because even in history it happened that jihad is self-defense, and it is legitimate to defend yourself. Whether you are persecuted in your body, in your family, in the freedom of expression, of belief, and then you have to defend yourself because the other uses force. So it is a legitimate case of defense. But to use it to attack, this is against Islam, and this is very clear in all the verses of the Quran. But it happens that sometimes here some twisting may happen, that the person is trying to project a religion on himself or on his case, because he may be persecuted not because he is a Muslim. Even when persecution happens or oppression happens, I have to ask myself, is this oppression because I am a Muslim, or this oppression because conflict of benefit, of interests, or something like this?
Well, it's perfectly clear to understand your worldly view or wider view than, say, a more homogeneous or secular view, because you now live in the United States. It's a heck of a long way from Egypt. You've lived in other parts of the world. All that has helped, hasn't it?
Well, I find that this deepens in my understanding, intellectually and psychologically, the importance of democracy and freedom. And I believe that God asked us, or required from us, to worship Him so that we may not worship one another.
You know, I still don't understand, and forgive me, Professor Osman, but what is it within you as an individual? Was it the Islamic faith? Was it God's gift to you that makes you believe that way? Or were there other people, say your mother or mentors or heroes in your life, who started guiding you on this path?
There are other people. Islam as a religion is very comprehensive, and some of its angles are valued more and are understood deeper according to the circumstances of life.
But are you special?
Me special? Yes, definitely I was exposed to the literature of the 19th century and the 20th century, whether it is the Western literature about freedom and human rights and so on, or also the reformers who came in the Muslim world and asked for freedom and asked for constitutional government in the name of Islam.
Does God speak through you?
I think that God speaks to everyone in a way or another, but I don't think that He speaks to me in a specific way.
Does He speak through you, though? Are your words God's
Oh
words?
yes, I believe that everyone can be a vehicle for God as long as he is channeling His words to people. So I am trying to understand His message. I am trying to extend it to people, and through this process, I believe sometimes when I read the Quran that God is speaking to me directly, and I quote this distinguished poet, Muslim poet Muhammad Iqbal, in the Indian subcontinent, when he said that his father always advises him to read the Quran as if it was revealed to him, not to Muhammad.
All right. God is speaking to you through the Quran. He is speaking through you in your teachings and your writings. Are you a prophet?
No, not at all. Because in Islam we believe that prophethood was terminated by Muhammad, I am not an exceptional person. I have my limitations. I have my weakness. The only thing I try to connect myself with this great source of power and perfection, the guidance of God.
Some weaknesses: a master in humanities, a law degree, followed by a PhD in Islamic law and institutional history from Princeton. It's been a remarkable career. Again, why Islamic law?
Probably because I began earlier, even as a child or as a teenager. My family was a middle-class family, not so religious in the sense that but they are ordinary Muslims or normal Egyptians. In Upper Egypt, conservative to a certain extent. So there was some atmosphere. And then in the beginning, when I went to the university, the period of openness to different currents of thinking and so on, at that time the Islamic trend was one of the important trends in Egypt after World War II, trying to struggle for the ending the occupation, the British occupation, for the independence of Muslim countries, and so on. So I lived in an Islamic atmosphere to a certain extent, especially in the university.
But you don't feel a special calling?
No. I am.
Given all your accomplishments, given the fact that you're well read, how many books?
About 40 books in Arabic and English.
That's remarkable. And you don't think that's a calling?
We call this guidance of God, but I don't think that is a special call. There are a lot of scholars in the history of the Islamic cultural Islamic history who were very young, and like Ghazali or anyone, and Ibn Rushd, Ibn Sina, and they had a lot of books. And of course their circumstances were more difficult. They cannot use the computer, they cannot use the typewriter even. They have to write everything. They have to read manuscripts. And they could produce this wonderful heritage. Thomas Aquinas, Maimonides, it is only Muslim, not only Muslims, but all these scholars in religions. And they did a marvelous job without claiming at all that they are saints or specific people or particular people. So I think that the human power or the human or the divine gifts to the human being are enormous if they are used in the proper way.
But as you already point out, it's been a pretty remarkable life. Why the modesty? You deserve all the accolades. Is it a sin? Is vanity a sin in Islam?
No, at all. It is a sort of acknowledgement of God's gifts. But there is a very, very fine line between arrogance and self-confidence. I think I have self-confidence. I am sure about what I am saying, about what I know, about what I don't know. But this does not mean that I should be considering myself a super human being or above others. There are many good people in this life.
Well, some people say there's also a fine line between being serious and being lighthearted or humorous. Do you make the distinction there?
Yes, I think that everybody should have light-heartedness, should have fun in his life. But it is a matter of proportion. If the 24 hours are just consumed in fun or sleep or something like this is the fine line. But to have sometimes, as a matter of fact, one of the traditions of Prophet Muhammad is to have this time, and it was in his behavior that he sometimes tried to be relaxed and relaxing with his companions.
How do you have fun? How do you relax?
Well, I
Gotcha.
watch the TV. I may have some talks with my daughter, with my wife, joking, kidding. always, and this is 24 hours, it is not having a special time. Whenever something invites any sort of kidding or joking or any comment or something, we joke, we laugh, we smile, we do everything.
What do you joke about?
Joke about, it is always in the history of comedy in the whole world, joking about the conflicts which happen or the inconsistencies which happened from any human being.
Right.
This sort of contradiction in things makes the situation funny, and you can joke about someone who is very serious in a certain time, but he does something which he does not care about, or anything like this can happen from me, from my daughter, from any misunderstanding. Sometimes the misunderstanding shows a lot of stupidity which cannot be expected from an average person, not necessarily in a person who concentrates about what he thinks or what he gets. So many things like this. The human being has his limitations, and these limitations sometimes they are tragic, and sometimes they are comic, and sometimes they are tragic and comic in the same time.
Give me an example.
As a matter of fact, in all history, you find something which we call ironic, and it was just a big joke. Sometimes if we turn this to the general cause of any nation, they have independence and they realize that it is a shallow independence, and they lost their lives in vain, and they just replaced the foreign autocrats or authoritarians by national authoritarian, and in certain times maybe the foreigners maybe at least use reason or common sense so that they may not go so far in their tyranny or in their injustice. You find that the national leader has no limits in many things like this in history, that in the end, what does we gain after all this?
Well, you've been to many parts of the world, seen many things that other people have not seen, been in prison, compared certain regimes to others within your own country. Now you're in the United States. How did you get here?
Well, I got here first for enjoying democracy in the United States. I came as a student, and then I came as a teacher at the universities, as a professor. And I found that the academic freedom in the universities and the political freedom in the states are really the essence of life, or the basics of humanity. And unless you get these basics, you cannot look for more perfection or more reform or getting humanity in a better situation. First, you should get the human beings. And it is essential for the human being to be free and to feel secure. And unless these human rights and democracy are there, you cannot at all have any aspirations for reforming the human situation, materially or psychologically or socially or culturally or whatever. So I find this very, very clear in the United States, that you can argue about anything. You can argue about social ills. Of course, there are social ills. You might find corruption. You might find violence. You might find many, many social ills. But with regard to freedom, this is the common value, the common grounds value, which cannot be touched. And I believe that this is the basic for the human being to be a human being. Unless he is free, he cannot worship God, he cannot choose a religion, he cannot be a good person or an evil person, he cannot be a human being acting in this world unless he is free to choose his way.
What surprised you the most about the United States, though?
The price of what?
Surprised you the most?
Surprised.
Yeah, when you came.
The hard work and seriousness, because in the Middle East or in many countries, what we saw from the United States was the movies And the movie, however perfect they may be in portraying the human life, they are movies, and they are trying to concentrate in 2 hours or something which can stand by itself. Life is not in this way. So having this idea that these people are just more funny or trying to make their life funny or easy or spoiled or whatever, all these things which are said about Western civilization or American society in the West, in the East, or in other places of the world, I find that these people are very hard workers. They work very hard. In the university, for example, I might see a student which has an unmodest dress, caring about her body herself, but she is, as a student, she is working very hard. So I believe that there are values, because in a competitive society like the United States, you cannot survive unless you work hard. So I am not caring about the motives. This is something different. I am caring about the result. The result is that these people building this civilization, this did not happen hazardously or just without a price. They work hard, they have sweat, they have efforts to build themselves. And the most important thing is that they are free to speak up to themselves and to tell any person about their views in a decent way. Of course, the individuals may differ in their expression, but the main common grounds here is to be free in talking to one another.
You keep referring to freedom and liberties. That obviously in your mind or in your belief is the cornerstone or one of the cornerstones of Islam. Is that why Islam works in the United States with people who live there?
I believe so, at least in presenting it, because now history taught Muslims that the importance of freedom. Probably during certain periods of their history, they were not aware of this. Now they are aware after being exposed to despotism and the tyranny and so on, sometimes torture under different regimes. So they began to appreciate this, and they began to underline the common grounds between them and the Western civilization, or even Western civilization, not American, starting from the Renaissance and the human being and the caring about the human being. We had a lot of ignoring the human being as human being, and we believe, as Muslims or all religious people, that God sent these messages just because He cares about the human being and He loves the human being. So this was the common ground. So that's why this is the angle that I look to the United States through, that I believe that I cannot worship God unless I feel free. And freedom is secure, and you can deal with any problem here in an acceptable or unacceptable way, but you should not touch freedom.
You know, the media has dealt with the issue in pretty much a negative form. Malcolm X, Louis Farrakhan, both who advocate separatism, not unity, not at all what Islam teaches. That bites very hard on the American psyche, and they see Islam as dangerous, as a threat.
The problem is that there is no confidence. If it is connected with Islam, unpredictable things can happen. What Muslims should, and I think they are doing this, should try to do during this period is to build the basis for confidence, that we are saying what we really mean. It is not a tactic to speak about peace or to talk about freedom or to talk about democracy. We believe really in all this, or to have good relations with all religions. That is really our stand. So to build this sort of confidence, then they can trust us when even lack of understanding is there. When there is a hot statement made by Farrakhan or by whoever, it is made according to certain psychological and social circumstances. Like any other thing which happened in the world, we try to interpret and to take things in good faith. taking things in good faith. That is the important thing. How can Muslims be, whether in the American arena or in the world arena, to be taken in good faith? That really they said something which might not be very, very convenient or very suitable, but they do not mean it. They are human beings and they make mistakes. It is a slip of the tongue. No, it is taken as if this is on the contrary. This is a subconscious which we are trying to hide it, and sometimes it comes on the surface. So the confidence is very important, and that's what we are trying to do.
I want to get back to you. How long have you been married?
32 years.
Her name?
Aida, A-I-D-A, the same name for the opera.
I've met her. She serves a good ice cream dish. Let me say that.
Well, she is a doctor in education and BA and master in French language and literature and civilization. She was taught at the Sorbonne, so she is my partner intellectually, the same as my partner in the family.
You know, I was just thinking that most couples argue about, who's going to do the dishes. You argue world politics. That's interesting. Is that how it works?
Yeah.
What's it like living with you, though? I mean, are you always this serious?
No, and I can't be always this serious. Otherwise, I would feel that I am completely dead, because life is not so serious. Humor is a part of life. Unless you understand the joke and this is a part of the intelligence, the human intelligence. And I think that one of the best things that I learned in the American and the British and the English literature in general, criticizing a person, that he has no sense of humor. I believe that the sense of humor is basic, and unless a person has a sense of humor, he may be lacking intelligence. He is not witty. He cannot understand the joke. He does not understand the light part of the life and how it is essential for the human existence.
Well, humor is part of marriage, right?
Yes.
And there's a lot of it in yours.
Yes, definitely.
All right. But also, successful marriage is based on faith as well. I mean, Islam has helped your marriage.
Of course, helped me. She is also religious. We pray together. We study the Quran together. She helped me in all my books, especially my big book on the concepts of the Quran, typing it and so on. She helped me even in many other books because I don't type well. I was slow even before the computer. And after the computer, I am completely illiterate. She works on the computer and on the internet and so on, and gives me the necessary information from different sources. So she is my partner in everything.
In everything?
Yes.
You're a world scholar. Does she ever say, excuse me, Fatih, but I think you're off base on this? And what do you say?
Because she had her PhD also in education, and she worked hard to get it. All this, I think she understands. Whenever I am busy or I am negligent of my responsibilities as a husband or as a father, she forgives me because she understands that sometimes I am overwhelmed with something, especially in humanities and social sciences. If you are thinking in a certain problem or something, you cannot detach yourself from it until you finish it. Otherwise, it would be lost. Differently from physics or chemistry or anything else, because you can stop at a certain thing and continue after this. But in human thinking, you have to carry on. Sometimes I sit on at my desk for 12 hours, 14 hours. I didn't speak to anybody. Maybe I don't eat. And she tolerates all this.
Keeps you in line.
Yes.
Like every good wife does.
Yes.
You are 70 years old. It's been a rather fascinating life of challenges, threats to your life, discovery, reinterpretation, moving from one country to another, and then finally to the United States. I imagine it's the place where you will choose to spend the rest of your life. Any regrets?
Yes, I learned even from the things which may cause regrets, but I can't assume or claim what some people may say, that if the clock goes board, they will do the same things that they did before. I don't think so. I think that my evaluation of my life, that I spent a lot of time in things that now I believe that I am not well prepared for. My best time is with my books, my thinking, my writing, and probably a lot of time was spent differently because of choosing wrong places, wrong times, wrong actions.
But you see, people would say you needed to make those mistakes because that's what makes you you today. And if it had been different, you wouldn't be you.
I agree 100%, and that's why I have said just now that I learned from this, even from the mistakes or the distribution of time in a wrong way, or thinking that I can be something else. Now I realized by going to and fro and forward and backward, my real abilities. I know myself better now than 50 years ago.
Mm-hmm. You didn't fear death when you were imprisoned, and I imagine there's even less reason to fear it now.
No, I don't fear death, but of course, death is something different from this life. So you will be separated from whom you love, whom you are acquainted with. You are going to the unknown, whatever the knowledge that we get from the holy books or something, it is still unknown, at least physically. Intellectually, I can imagine. My imagination for something which would be completely different than our life can be mistaken. So from this point of view, yes, death definitely is not something easy. I can say it may not be fearful, but it is not easy. It is still a hard thing to happen because it changed completely from our life to something which will be completely different.
Well, may God grant you many more years, but when the end comes, what will be the legacy you'll leave us?
Well, my books. This is the legacy, and hammering and emphasizing that although the sources of God are permanent, the human being which receives them and understands them and applies them is changeable. So the outcome of this sort of equation between what is permanent and what's changeable would be changeable. So the dynamism of the human being in fulfilling the guidance of God and the teachings of God will be always different and various.
Professor, thank you very much.
Thank you.
I've really enjoyed this hour.
Thank you. It is my pleasure. Thank you very much.
And thank you for being with us. I'm Bob Jimenez, and you've been watching an interview